Welcome to the 3 Deeper Cuts podcast, your lifestyle magazine for the practicing surgical pathologist. I'm your host, Chuck G. Every week, we bring you something to think about, something to read, or something to listen to. 3 Deeper Cuts is brought to you by Formalin Fixed Paraffin-Embedded Tissue. Emphasis on the formalin, because without the high exposure to 10% buffer neutral formalin that I experienced during my 4 years of residency in St. Louis, we wouldn't be able to bring you all the crazy things that show up on 3 Deeper Cuts Publishing and on the newsletter. A couple of announcements for today. It's all good in the hood. I had some family in town from Southern California. It was a good time meeting up with the nephews, the aunties, and the uncles. And my kid got a chance to play, see some new sights around the city. All around, good choice. If you're not spending time with family, I recommend that you do so. In these uncertain times, what else is going on? A friend of mine recently made partner in his private practice. That's a W. We need more physician-owned private practices out there because the powers that be are attempting to silo the practice of medicine into large corporate healthcare practices that do not have the patient's best interest in mind. So long live small boutique physician-owned private practices. What else? The U.S. Cap is going on this week. I did not go. It's in Baltimore, right about the time that a container ship ran into a large bridge. It was very impressive, also very tragic, obviously. Who knows what caused it? I know that power goes out on ships from time to time. I don't know when the power went out, and I can't really speculate, but prayers to the families that were affected by that, and hopefully we figure this shit out. So on our show today, we have got a friend of mine that I met on the interwebs, and his name is Swanagan. Swanagan is an electrical engineer in the southeastern United States. He has an impressive life story. Grew up poor in a trailer house in the Appalachian Mountains in West Virginia. Left home at age 18, worked construction, and realized young in life that he had an aptitude for math and engineering, got a degree in electrical engineering, and one of his first jobs was working in a formaldehyde plant. And seeing as how you and I are exposed to formaldehyde on a daily basis, I shouldn't say we're exposed to formaldehydes. We use formalin with joy. It's the foundation of the histology laboratory. So I think I posted something about putting a little formalin into your coffee in the morning for that extra kick. I don't remember exactly what I wrote, but this was like a few months ago. And he commented on it like, hey, man, I worked in a formalin plant. I was just like, oh, my God, this is awesome. Never met anybody with firsthand experience in the production of this glorious chemical. Turns out it's not so glorious. The chemical process is highly toxic and potentially dangerous to the people that work in the plant. So without further ado, I'm going to transition into the podcast with Swanagan, where we talk about what he learned working in a formaldehyde plant. Here we go.
5 o'clock Tuesday evening. He's like, if you want to meet me there, he's like, I'm going to run the red light. You guys can give me a ticket. They didn't show up.
Oh, yeah?
I think you ran it anyway, yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, that's how small it was. But, so I moved out when I was 18. Started working with my dad. Took a year off when I graduated high school and just worked a full year with my dad. Worked construction work and just trying to figure out what I was going to do. And one of my dad's friends was an electrical engineer. And he's like, I think you'd be really good at this. You should really go to college. And so I didn't really have a plan. I just, was good at math, knew electricity because my dad was an electrician. And started electrical engineering. Had no idea what electrical engineers did.
Okay.
And then about 1 year into my college experience, I had a call from another one of my dad's friends. He's like, hey, I've got this opportunity for you to interview for an internship at DuPont. And DuPont at the time was a way larger company than it is now. And the internships were very competitive. Come to find out, I was the first person to interview It was last minute. He called me the day before. And so I showed up. They were interviewing on campus, and I showed up the next day. And I was the first person he interviewed. He was interviewing, I think, 70 college students.
Okay.
I was like, there's no way I'm getting it. Yeah. I was like, I'm the first guy. He's going to forget all about me. They're only hiring six positions. But somehow I made it in. It was a really good program. So I ended up doing a total of 5 rotations at a chemical plant, for DuPont, which was right down the road. It's like 30 minutes from college. And we just did a rotation semester. So like part-time. It's great experience though. It's like $28 an hour, which was amazing for a college kid, and great experience.
Nice.
Yeah, it's pretty
socked
sweet.
away at a good amount with that. So well, you started at DuPont, and was this where your first gig was in the formaldehyde manufacturing section?
So I basically spent all of my time in what's called the Delrin plant. So Delrin is DuPont named all their plants after the products that they produced. So Delrin is it's a homopolymer, and the big customers for Delrin, they're still making it. It's no longer DuPont, but a venture capital firm bought it. Their biggest customer is Bic. So all the Bic lighters, pens, that plastic comes from Delrin. They make there in Parkersburg. Yeah,
interesting.
But so sorry.
So that's no. So that's where you started, and then when did I think we got to give a little bit of background just to so you're not weirded out. So you and I have talked before, like, most of the people who listen to this podcast, or at least more than half of them, are pathologists, and pathologists are around formaldehyde a lot, especially in training during it. We have just like a fondness for it because it's basically the backbone of a histology lab. Like, without formaldehyde, there is no H&E slides or anything like that. So that's why I have a weird interest in this chemical. I'm also aware that it's highly toxic. The concentrations that we use are like 10%, so it's not very strong. But what was it like for you, man? Like, just being around it?
Dude, it was intense. Honestly, like I said, I'd never been in a chemical plant. I had no idea. And another funny story about that, I had driven by that plant when I was working my first job while I was in high school, which was driving a box truck for Habitat for Humanity. And I remember driving by that plant, and the guy that was riding with me at the time, he still reminds me of this to this day. We're driving by it, and I was like, you couldn't pay me to work there. just because of my preconceived notions about chemical plants.
Okay.
Come to find out they could pay me to work there, and I did. But but it was intense, man. Like I said, it started out in Delrin, and Delrin is a big plant. It's like this big weird plant. They started in 1948.
Okay.
So it's an old plant. But the process is huge, and it starts off with methanol, actually. And so they brought methanol in via barge, and they filled out these huge tanks full of methanol. But the first stage in the process was taking that raw methanol and converting it to formaldehyde. And so they originally used to buy aqueous formaldehyde, and then they trucked it in the same way they did methanol. But they did an ROI, back in the early 90s, and found it was cheaper to actually build a formaldehyde plant right next to the Delrin plant and just truck in methanol instead of formaldehyde. So that's what they did. I think the plant went online like 1993. But I didn't really work there as an intern, but when I started full-time, I got more and more involved in that process.
Okay. What are the things that what are the main risks in the manufacturing process?
Oh man, there's so many. So you have to do, safety is like huge. There's most of the safety manuals and regulations that DuPont has, written in blood. So someone died, unfortunately, and then they, beefed up the process, put in these safety standards. And so there, in a chemical plant, there's a lot of ways to die. It's pretty intense. And especially the formaldehyde plant, it was particularly hazardous. In fact, when they were building it and they brought it online for the first time, they blew the top of one of the reactors off. And it landed like a mile away. Just huge chunk of stainless steel, probably hundreds of pounds.
Oh man,
yeah, landed a mile away. It was intense. So the parameters that you had to operate that, temperature, pressure, all of the things, you had to keep them. It was, the parameters were very tight. Remember the process engineer. So my role was control systems engineer, which is kind of a niche of electrical engineering, but it's where you program the systems that run the plants. So you're in charge of all the instrumentation, all of the control systems that run the pumps, the valves, everything that can do semi-automatically. Okay. I remember the process engineer the first time, he drew a graph on the board, and he's like, this curve represents where we run it, and he's like, and then he drew some lines like right on the outside edge of that real squiggly line. He's like, and this is, if we go outside these parameters, the plant will blow up. So, but like back to the hazards of it. I mean, there's obviously, at the time, formaldehyde was classified as a probable carcinogen, I think.
Okay.
And I think in 2011.
That's what I've got written down here.
Yeah. Like 2011 is when right around the time that I started working in there, more. It was classified as a known carcinogen. So, it was obviously, it was a joke when it was a probable carcinogen. I remember the other engineers and operators talking about it, like, yeah, it's probably, so you're fine.
Probably.
Even though they're like,
Yeah.
So obviously.
So the fumes. So let me give a little outline for the audience. So formaldehyde, I'm just getting this from the Wikipedia page. I've got it pulled up here. And so you start with methanol vapor.
Yeah.
And it's passed over a platinum wire. What does that actually look like?
Oh, yeah. So actually, I'm going to pull up the Wikipedia page too, because if you look it up, it actually describes the Delrin process exactly. So if you get down to the industrial, anyway, I'm not gonna bore you with that. But basically you bring in the formaldehyde, which is a liquid, you vaporize it, and then you pump it through a reactor. And so what a reactor looks like, if you're not familiar, is if you just look at like a pill capsule,
okay,
and you stand it up on its end, and then you just like multiply that by, several orders of magnitude. I think these reactors were like 30 feet tall, maybe 40 foot tall, 20 foot in diameter.
Okay.
There was two of them. And so you pump that raw, huge
structure,
massive. Yeah. And so what you would do is you would pump this methanol, which is, it's 3 huge pumps. I mean, I think they were 600 horsepower, maybe, which is just insanely massive. The pumps themselves, the motors themselves are like as big as a Volkswagen.
Wow.
So it's pumping, hundreds of gallons per minute through methanol through these reactors. And so how the formaldehyde is created is the methanol, when it gets into the reactor is filled, like if you think of the pill capsule, like the middle part of the pill capsule where it's just a cylinder.
Right.
That part was filled with stacked tubes. And so the tubes ran the whole length of that middle section. And I think there was 7,000 tubes, like bundles. And so if they opened the hatch in the top of the reactor and you walked in, which you could do, you were standing on a floor that was just a bunch of tubes. So like the top of the tubes, if you look down, just look like a bunch of, tile made up of these circles, but it, just full of,
okay.
It was actually full of catalyst. And so I think it's an iron oxide catalyst.
Okay.
And when the methanol hits that catalyst, that iron oxide, it creates the chemical reaction that creates formaldehyde gas. And so the gas comes out the top of the reactor, and it gets caught in a distillation column, and it gets slurried up into a aqueous solution, which was then pumped over to the other part of the plant, which polymerized the formaldehyde and made Delrin polymer. But the formaldehyde at that point is like 99.99% concentrated pure formaldehyde. It's pretty intense.
So you would not be able to stand anywhere near that, right?
Right.
How much does it have to be diluted down before you can even be in the same room as an open container?
I can't remember. They had, there was obviously standards around that, and they had the exact numbers. At this point, that's like 12 years ago. I can't exactly remember.
Sure.
Obviously, it's a very small parts per million. And they had redundant safety systems that was just constantly checking. It was testing air quality around that whole plant. And if any one of them went off, it would just shut down everything immediately.
Okay. Okay. So I want to I want to pause and just read this paragraph. Is interesting. Under occurrence, processes in the upper atmosphere contribute to up to 90% of total formaldehyde in the environment. Formaldehyde is an intermediate in the oxidation or combustion of methane, as well as other carbon compounds in forest fires, automobile accidents, tobacco smoke. When produced in the atmosphere by the action of sunlight and oxygen on atmospheric methane and other hydrocarbons, it becomes part of smog. Formaldehyde has also been detected in outer space. That's kind of wild.
Yeah,
so you're like hanging around the L.A., downtown L.A. You're pickling yourself in the air.
Yeah. What's crazy, dude, is we talk about walking in the reactor. I did that several times because part of the process was. It was a continuous process, so it ran 24/7, year-round. But obviously, when you're dealing with that kind of equipment, that you have to do maintenance on it, or else it's going to, fail at some point. So what they would do is every year for a month, they would shut down the whole plant, do all the maintenance in that single month, and then start back up again and run for 11 months.
Okay.
But as part of that maintenance is you had to change out those catalyst beads that were in those tubes in the reactor. And so it was the process engineer's job, which I was not the process engineer, but I was a new engineer. And so the process engineer would always take like the lowest guy on the totem pole in there with him to verify, that the beads were changed out. So you had to do it a couple of times. So the process is they would there was clips on the bottom section of those tubes, and they would take all those clips out, and it would drain all the catalyst. And then they would put all the clips back on. Which is, when you're doing that 7,000 tubes, it takes a while.
Wow.
But
so these catalyst, could you describe the catalyst beads? Like, is that with the heavy metal or platinum metal?
Yeah, so it's like an iron oxide, but it looks just like a, those necklaces that you used to wear as a kid that like had the candy on it?
Yeah.
That's exactly what they look like, except for they're just like brown.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Nothing too crazy. But part of the process is when they put the clips back on the bottom, and before they filled the tubes back up with catalyst, you would have to go in the top section of that reactor, close the hatch back in on you, and they would shine lights up through the bottom, and then you would go in there with a bucket full of huge bolts.
Okay.
And you would just look down through each and every one of those tubes to make sure that the clip was in it. And so obviously that took a while. So you'd be in there for hours, with the hatch closed, just like staring down at these tubes. If you seen one that was missing, you would drop the bolt down in the hole, and that's how they would know to.
Wow.
So, dude, and then you'd have to do it again when they filled it with catalyst to make sure every one of the tubes was filled up with catalyst.
Okay.
And so, yeah, I've spent hours in the top portion of a formaldehyde reactor.
No kidding.
Yeah, we're like, it's like 99. Obviously, there's no formaldehyde gas in there when you're in there. You get shut down, but yeah, it's
what kind of PPE are you wearing when you're at the top of that,
dude? Absolutely nothing. Yeah,
no way.
Yeah.
No,
no
eye shield, face shield, no mask.
I mean, you have safety glasses, which obviously isn't doing anything, and you have to wear Nomex, which is like a fire retardant. Just a coverall, and a hard hat.
Interesting.
But that's it. I mean, nothing like to cover your mouth or your eyes so I've probably got something good cooking up.
That's so cool. Yeah, you're probably all right. I think it's like, at least from what I've read, the exposure to higher concentrations of formaldehyde, like over time, like years and decades, like increases the risk of nasopharyngeal and respiratory tract carcinoma.
Right.
But I've never actually seen it. Granted, I'm early career. Maybe I'll see it one day of somebody, but
Right. I've never seen that either. And you know, the plant that I worked in was called Washington Works, and there was a movie. It came out, I think, like 4 years ago now. It's called Dark Waters. I think it's Dark Waters with Mark Ruffalo. It's like a big production movie, but it's about that plant.
No kidding. All right, Mark.
Yeah. So there was a big scandal. Yeah, it was made in 2019. It's like 5 years ago. But yeah, it's about that plant that I worked in. Basically, there was another plant on site, which was the Teflon plant. And so the Teflon plant makes Teflon. And Teflon contains PFOA, which is like PFAS.
Okay.
And it's, you know, Teflon is so prevalent. And other companies make PFAS, and it's in a lot of other products, but Teflon's probably the biggest. And they've tested, like, it's like in every single person's blood that's on the planet. The only blood that they've tested that it's not in is in like blood samples they took from soldiers in like World War I or something. And so it's just like, it's made it into every single thing. But there was like, they used to dump the product, like the waste product with that stuff in it on a local farm, like right across the river.
Okay.
And it was like killing animals and people were getting cancer. And it's nuts. So that's what the movie's about, was just like,
wow.
Yeah. DuPont covered it up.
I'll check this out.
But
thanks for letting me know about this.
Yeah, no worries. But the reason I said that is we're talking about people, like seeing people with that kind of cancer. I never saw anybody with like that nasal, passage cancer. There's a ton of people that I worked with that had testicular cancer, which is like that PFAS stuff targets.
Wow.
And so it's definitely, was like a real thing. It's nuts.
Oh, yes. All right.
Yeah. It's really, really crazy stuff.
That is crazy. So
yeah.
I wanted to talk a little bit more about the environment. So I was reading here that you have to, so in the reactor, the temperature gets up to like 650 degrees Celsius. Is that right?
I think that's a little higher. I think that's for like the silver oxide version. I think we were like in the iron, which is like 2 something to 400 C, which is still, a lot.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, okay, gosh, I'm going down these formalin rabbit holes right now. So, like I said, in our line of work, for practicing pathologists, I don't think anybody has any idea of where formaldehyde actually comes from. It just shows up in the lab, and we dilute it down, and we fix tissues with it. I was kind of curious, like, how does somebody stay in? I mean, now that this movie's been made, like, what changes did they make to this? I know it wasn't the cancer wasn't related to the formaldehyde; it was the PFAS,
right?
But but that plant, you obviously didn't want to spend your whole career there. Like, what's the average duration of what a young engineer spends in a plant like that?
On average nowadays, it's probably 4 to 5 years is like the top. I mean, when I started, the guys that taught me my job, they were, 30 and 40 year guys.
Okay.
But basically everybody, like from the time that I started, and I think it was like mid 2000s is when the whole PFOA thing kind of came out. And I think that, obviously I think that had a lot to do with, the longevity of people kind of after that point. But it's really tough to find people to work in there nowadays. Yeah. 2 to 4 years, I think, is probably an average.
Okay. So the next I want to know where you went after that, but also just of interest. So I ended up going down this giant squid rabbit hole because further down on the formaldehyde Wikipedia page, there's this dude with this gnarly stash and sideburns. I don't know if it's like from the 70s, but he's injecting a giant squid. I don't know if you ever look into like waste, 10 minutes watching videos of Humboldt squid attack prey in the Sea of Cortez is pretty interesting. So anyways, so you finish your time at the formalin plant. What was your next step?
I went to a Japanese company. It was called Kurare, and they made the glass interlayer. It's like a sheet of this chemical that goes in between safety glass. So like the skyscrapers that have hurricane resistant glass, which is basically just this interlayer that's in between two panes of glass, and it's called like Century Glass is another name for it. If you have seen that walkway that's over the Grand Canyon, you can, it's just glass.
Yes.
You can like see through the bottom. That's Century Glass that came from that Kurare plant. Yeah, so I went there. It actually used to be a DuPont plant as well, but it got sold to DuPont before I started.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. It was also, pretty hazardous process as well.
So you've really been for the ringer, man. That's like hazing for electrical engineers, right? They give you all the most dangerous jobs.
Yeah, what's nuts too is like my first year, and I started, obviously I had like the 18 months of cumulative experience with my co-op experience. But my first year, like being a full-time engineer, they put me in another plant that made plastic as well, as like the senior guy, which was nuts. And then when I went to Kurare, I was like also the senior guy with like 4 years of experience, which is like tells you a lot about like where we are right now, which is terrifying. And actually I was watching, have you ever seen the Chernobyl, the HBO?
I watched like a couple half episodes of it. I haven't watched the whole series, but
dude, it's so intense. It actually was like bringing back a lot of memories, because if you watch that and you like see the control room and you like see the guys out in the plant, that's exactly what a chemical plant looks like. Like,
wow,
it's like verbatim what you would see in a chemical plant. So it's like, wow, I've been there, But in the movie, they're interviewing like after everything happens, and the people are laying in the hospital with horrendous radiation damage. The reporter goes up to the lead engineer of like interrogating him, and he like comes to find out the guy's like 24, and he's just
he's the most experienced guy there.
Right. I was like, man, that just kind of, that's in a nutshell, because like I was seeing this, I was like 24, 25 and being like the senior guy. And it's just a byproduct of that no one wants to work in these plants anymore.
Got you.
Because of like formaldehyde's a known carcinogen. It's just like they're not glamorous. Everyone wants to be a software engineer, making Google money. So it's just extremely tough to get people to work in those environments. And when you do, like, you get put through the ringer and you trial by fire.
Was the pay decent at least? I mean, in college you were making probably way above the 90th percentile.
Yeah, I was thinking when I started out, I was like, my first pay was like $72,000 a year, and then I made that for a couple years, and then when I started Kurare, it was like $80,000 a year. So
nice.
It was good at the time.
Yeah,
but I think it's not enough for what those guys deal with. Looking back,
yeah. I wonder if anyone has lost their sense of smell. In our training to be in my line of work, we spend a lot of hours in the laboratory grossing specimens, and so you're kind of responsible for fixing them properly. And then it's like every evening you open the formaldehyde containers, like wafts. You just get this. And with the, most of us don't do autopsies anymore regularly. But in residency, you're just got these big buckets of formaldehyde to, put, like autopsy tissues in. And, we would always wonder about that, because you'd go home and you'd be like, man, can't really smell dinner that well. But
now that you mention it, I do remember a couple operators that worked in that plant being like, not having a sense of smell anymore. And
wow,
I think that's definitely a thing.
It's intense. Well, hats off to them, and their service. 'Cause, it has a lot of medical utility. The PFAS I'm a little more concerned about, so I'll dig into that later.
Another part of that process was when they would cap the formaldehyde chain or the polymer chains. And so that was like the back end of the process. It was called a capper, and it was just like this repurposed concrete mixer, but it was just like massive. It was like, I think 70 feet long, maybe 100 feet long, somewhere in that range.
Okay.
Like 20 feet in diameter, and it just like constantly rotated, just like slowly. But what they would do is they'd pump the polymer as an aqueous solution into this capper. They call it the capper because it would cap the change, but they would also pump acetic anhydride, which is it's like concentrated vinegar, essentially. And they would, you would try to make the ratio, there was a certain ratio you had to mix it at. But sometimes, every once in a while, you get too much acetic anhydride out on the back end, and so you would get these waste boxes that would just like dump it out the end. And you would get these big boxes full of this stuff, and if it had too much of that acetic anhydride in it, I remember a couple times I'd be like walking by a box and they called it high hack, HAC.
Wow.
And it would just like drop you to your knees like immediately. Wow. It was just like so potent. And yeah, so there's a lot of sensory overload situations that, yeah, if you did that, for 20 plus years, you'd probably have, your senses would be, a little lessened, I would guess.
I could see that. And then, so how did you transition into, now you work more in the maritime industry, right?
No, I worked for the Navy as a defense contractor for a lot of Navy projects.
Okay.
But it's, my official title now is Director of Industrial Control Systems, but it's for a defense contractor. And what I do now is mainly work on business development for our company to get more defense contracts. So it's a lot of proposal writing, partnership development, that sort of thing.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I got to this job. So I went back to DuPont after Carrare, actually. I was at Carrare for like 3 years. And DuPont called me and they wanted me to come back. But this time it was in South Carolina, which is where I am now, Charleston area. And they have a plant down here. It's called Hytrail. So Hytrail is the, another product, but the name of the plant was Hytrail as well. And another high hazard process. Dude, this one was probably, it's not as bad as Delrin, but it was nuts. I remember this one time we had a DMT. It's not the DMT you're thinking about, but it's like a molten polymer. Like it was actually, it had to be kept hot to keep it molten. And it was like one of the raw ingredients, but it was just like constantly pumping this molten polymer throughout the plant. There was a leak in one of the lines, and we discovered it just by doing these field walks. And we walked up onto the third floor, and it just looked like a Christmas scene in the middle of a Christmas plant or a chemical plant, because the when it met the air, it just like turned into this white fluff, and it just like covered everything, just like it was snowing on the ground, and like you're just like standing there kind of breathing that stuff in. It's probably not the best, but I kind of got burned out. That plant kind of burned me out. I did, it was right in the middle of COVID, and I was in a operations management role. So I was managing the plant. Had like close to 40 direct reports, people that were reported directly to me, 24/7 operation, just always on call. It's just really, really stressful. I slept in my office a few times.
Wow.
Yeah. And, during that time, my dad passed away, obviously.
Yeah. You've written about that. I read.
Yeah, for sure. And the last time I would have talked to my dad, I was at the plant. I was sleeping in my office. And I remember I had a, so that Nomex I was telling you about is just those coveralls, and they're rough and it's terrible. But like I was using some of that for a pillow because it was like 3 a.m. and I was still working. I was like, I'm going to get like an hour of sleep and I'll come back. And I was like using that for a pillow. My dad called and I didn't answer. I was like, I'll call him back later. And that would have been the last time I talked to him. And so when I was going up for my dad's funeral in West Virginia, like that was all I was thinking about. I was like, man, wow, like no job is worth missing, the last conversation with your dad. So a couple months after I got back, I had a job opportunity come up with the company I'm at now, doing this kind of work. And it's like, yeah, I'm going to do it. And really, I basically threw away a pretty good career. At DuPont, I was on this track. Like I was the highest person to be an operations manager. it's kind of like hit, on a certain track. And but yeah, it was worth it to me to step away. I just had my son who's 2 years old now, and
I see.
It's like I'm going to spend time with him. I'm not going to be sleeping on the floor, 40 miles away. And that's kind of how I ended up where I'm at. Yeah.
That there's so many lessons in your story, man. And I read some of your stuff. I haven't opened every single email, but I've gotten a pretty good gist of kind of like where you're coming from, like, what your vision is. And I just find it interesting. And it's just inspiring to know that, like, you grew up in a trailer and, you're a young guy, you're younger than me, you're a family man, and you just navigated a major tragedy, before the age of 30 or right around thereabouts. So I think that's just a really positive message that people can learn from.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And,
so we talked about the past, we talked a little bit about the present. Where is the optimalist going to be 5 to 10 years from now? Let's visualize that.
Yeah, man. That's dude, I'm so bad at this kind of thing. But it's something I've been working on. So yeah, hopefully I can be sort of coherent as I talk about this. But
that's okay. It doesn't have to be perfect.
Cool. It won't be. No, so I really, when I think about the future, like freedom is one of those things I think about, is like just the freedom to have the agency to choose, my future. And so what that kind of looks like for me is being able to, do the things that allow me to be the best version of myself. And so when I think about that, like I said, to call back to being an electrical engineer in a chemical plant, like that was never the plan.
Okay.
And it just kind of happened through various happenstance, which is life. But going forward, I want to be way more intentional about the kind of big life decisions as much as I possibly can. So it's just like cultivating the mindset and the the skills that will allow me to do that. And so optimalism is the container and the frame that I use to kind of start living life in that way. It's just like being optimistic and resilient. I think those are the two big traits that I just try to be better at every day, and as I try to make this work. But yeah, for me, I think optimalism and optimal, I think, is I could build a community around that. And so the way I'm thinking about it now is I'm trying to distill everything that I've used to get from the poor kid in the trailer, living off of WIC cards and McDonald's once a week.
Yeah.
To being at the executive level where I am now in a city that's cool to live in next to the ocean.
Absolutely.
It's like trying to condense a lot of that stuff into, for one, how could I teach my kids to be more optimistic and more resilient, and to carve out their own path and be intentional about life. And so what I'm working on now is just kind of distilling that manifesto into a book for once. I'm kind of working through that. It's taking it slow, but building it piece by piece. And ideally, I'm going to build a community around that where I can, build some courses through, resilient living, making money online, that sort of thing. Just kind of taking it one day at a time, brick by brick. But the vision's becoming clear slowly. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, just brick by brick. Takes time. I mean, you're a family man. You got a full-time job,
right?
House to maintain. These things take time, but you wouldn't have all those lessons, those micro traumas, if you hadn't kind of gone through the last 15 years of what you've been through.
Right. Exactly.
And more to teach. I mean, I'm learning from you. I never in a million years thought I would meet somebody who actually has this life experience with the chemical that is like integral to my day-to-day work.
Yeah, dude.
That's the power of the
crazy.
Yeah, it's just the power of the internet. It's
It's incredible.
Positive stuff. You know, there's that's what I like to focus on with internet, you know, friendships and whatever, websites, whatever. So there's some good that comes out of it.
Oh, dude, it's so cool. Like, who would have thought, like, you're a doctor in Houston or Dallas, I'm sorry.
Yeah. I was in Houston, moved to
Yeah. You know, I'm a engineer in South Carolina. It's like, but like we have so much in common in like this like shared belief system and just like way of living.
Yeah.
It's like never would have been possible without like starting to write online. It's like, it's so cool. Like I've never, in the past year of writing online, I've met so many people that are like me, you know, unlike me, but like me in a lot of ways, just like the same kind of way of living that I've just never met. Maybe one or two of the same kind of people throughout my life, but like there's just such a, like when you get in the right, you know, conditions, it's just like, it's wild. It's
yeah,
cool.
Absolutely. I mean, we're kind of at this new frontier, you know what I mean? Like most of the physical world, at least on Earth, except for maybe some of the ocean trenches, like a lot of the physical world has been charted already, but now we're kind of in this other mode of existence. So I think, you know, like this is a good way of using it to share ideas. Right. You know, I'm eager to learn from you. You're a few steps ahead of me.
I don't know,
you know, with that, and
likewise.
And I think just the more, you know, talking about what you're building on the side is just a good thing to do because it clarifies it for yourself, and it also opens up to some feedback and ideas from, you know, other people that you meet. So
yeah.
So I appreciate you, man, like taking time out of your busy schedule to be on this podcast. This is one of the very early episodes. A lot of them are just, well, you're on my list. A lot of them are just me yapping into a microphone.
Yeah, I love it.
Trying to be very intentional about the guests because realistically, I got to take this slow. You know, I have other commitments and responsibilities, and if I don't do a good job at those, well, then the party's over. You know, like there's no more podcast, and
exactly.
So,
yeah.
but
you're crushing it though. I love what you're doing. It's just it's so good. It's
We haven't. We have not even dabbled into the creative side of Swanagan. Maybe that'll be a future episode. But for those of you listening, like Swanagan is also an accomplished banjo player. He's in a band. I'm sure he's been in multiple bands over the years, and he travels and performs. So
dude, I would love to pick your brain sometime. I really want to start a podcast eventually. But yeah, you're
awesome.
You're obviously on a whole nother level, and I'd love to pick your brain about how to make it work.
Well, I'm glad I'm projecting that whole another level energy because, to be honest, I'm just fumbling around figuring it out as I go. Just trying this thing, that thing, and then making sense. Actually, dude, a month ago, so I took a little break from the podcast because I was uploading them like every week, and then doing like, you know, writing newsletters. But then things were getting kind of busy at work, so I had to just be realistic about what cadence is gonna, because I don't want to quit, because you know, then the party's you don't want to. So you want to find you want a sustainable cadence so that quitting, you don't get tempted to quit, you know, so. Right. So yeah, I just backed off and now I found that audio only is a lot less stressful to me because I don't have to edit any video. It's just like, and then for the guest, like you, I don't need you to be, like if your kid walks into the room and you know, like you have to do something on the side, it's not the end of the, you know what I mean? It's not like.
Yeah, dude, I was actually listening to Tim Ferriss. Do you listen to Tim Ferriss's podcast?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Not as much as I used to, but I'm a huge Tim Ferriss fan. Yeah,
same, man. He's like one of my big heroes.
Yeah.
It was a recent episode. He was talking. Someone was asking him, like, you know, what's the future look for your podcast? And he's like, well, I'm trying to find out the way. He's like, if I was starting out right now, he said, it's like way more crowded, you know, there's way more competition than there used to be. So he's like, I've been thinking about how to make myself differentiated from what's already out there. And one of the things he mentioned was audio only. Like everyone's doing video. He's like, but most of the time what I see is like people will have the video up on like another tab and they're not watching it. So, you know, kind of audio only is really
Yeah.
kind of innovative again, just because
Dude.
everyone else is doing video. So that's cool.
Yeah, that's how I see it. And like the type of people that I'm trying to Swanagan, like I highly doubt that during your day, as an executive, I highly doubt you're taking large swaths of time to consume video content while you're writing a proposal for a new, business, a new client or something. It just
Exactly.
People whose time is valuable, like video is a waste of their time unless it's a necessity. Like if you're trying to illustrate a point, like now I'm going to go watch the Ruffalo film from 2019.
Right.
There's a point to it.
Yeah, dude, I have so many. I checked the other day. I've got 285 videos, most of which are 20 minutes long, in my watch later. My watch later.
Yeah, it's too much of a commitment, right?
It's like I'm never going to go through all this.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So
but I'll listen to it all day.
Yeah. I'm like super bullish on audio. I think it's just like,
Agreed.
it just gets you to a different level of people, and I just think it's fun. I just love the whole media.
I think it's your zone of genius for sure. Like your voice is great for one. I'm super jealous of your voice. And number two, like you ask great questions. Like I feel super comfortable. You do a great job at it, dude. So
sweet, man.
Definitely, you're doing what you're supposed to be doing.
Well, on that note, brother, we'll sign off, and we'll talk another time. Kind of debrief and maybe plan for the future. We got other topics we can dive into in the future. So, Swanagan, I wish you the best. Thanks for coming on to 3 Deeper Cuts.
Yeah, thanks, Chuck. Appreciate you, man.
All right,
thanks for having me on.
Bye-bye.
All right, bye.